This is Jessica Taylor interviewing Ducey Ortiz on June 20th, 2013 at 3:30 p.m. Miss Ducey Ortiz, can you please state your full name?
Anne Marie Ducey Ortiz.
Okay. And what is your date of birth?
March 25th, 1962.
Where were you born?
I was born in Amityville on Long Island, New York.
Okay. And what are your parents' names and occupations?
My mom is Patricia Gorman, and she's a retired school teacher. And my dad is William Ducey, and he was an accountant. He's deceased.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay. And what is or was your occupation?
I'm currently the director of planning for Gloucester County, soon to be the director of planning and zoning for Gloucester County.
Congratulations.
Yes, thanks. Yes.
What did you do before this?
I've been in Gloucester County for 13 years. Started out as a planner 2, moved up to a planner 3. Then when the previous planning director left, I applied for the job and got it. And then recently the zoning administrator left, and they're combining departments. Before that, I worked up in New York. I worked in the town of Huntington as a planner. And before that, I was an environmental analyst. And before that, I worked for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as a wildlife biologist.
Wow.
So that's
many lives.
That was a world ago.
Yeah, so when exactly did you come to Gloucester?
2000.
Okay. And what brought you here?
Well, growing up on Long Island, we lived in a place called Bayshore. It's kind of hectic lifestyle up there. My husband worked nights, I worked days. We had a child, and we were just looking for a better opportunity. My in-laws had moved down here. Again, most of it's a military connection. They knew someone in the military. They came down and visited the area. It's very much like Long Island used to be before it got very developed. So they moved down here first, and my parents-in-law moved down, and a planning job opened up, and my brother-in-law sent us the advertisement. We kind of weighed the pros and cons and decided to make the big move to Virginia. So that's what we did 13 years ago.
And what is your first memory of Main Street?
Oh, I can tell you that very easily because I came here was first for my interview. And we had come down and visited my in-laws. They live in Matthews, and we would always go down to the Mariners Museum because my husband is a big boat person. And we would drive by the intersection where the Edge Hill Texaco is, and we'd always make the left, never made the right. And when my brother-in-law sent me the job description, I'm like, Gloucester's really ugly. Because all I saw of Gloucester was Route 17 from the courthouse to the point. And I don't know if you've driven that, but it's, it was developed a lot, in the 80s, a lot of it done without zoning. And so when I came for my interview, I made the right. And they had already done the enhancement project. So I was like, I can't believe this cute little village is down here. And my interview was in County Building 1, so I had to go around the circle. And actually, no, I interviewed twice. So first I interviewed in this building, which is the old garage. And then the second one was in County Building 1, which is they call the old Daily Press building. But just thought, I couldn't believe that this was here and all the historic structures around the circle. And I remember my husband met me after the interview, and we sat out in front of, at the time it was Kelsick, it's now the Wild Rabbit, and had lunch out, it was in March, and it was a beautiful day, and all the daffodils were blooming, and it was just, I could work here. So, and so fortunately I got the job, so.
Yeah, so there's this huge aesthetic contrast between Gloucester Courthouse and then Gloucester after suburbanization.
Right, and again, thinking of Gloucester being a pretty big community, so the big difference between Gloucester Route 17 and then the Main Street Village, and then I hadn't even seen the north end of Gloucester, which is very rural. So yeah, big difference.
Mm-hmm. So can we talk a little bit more about the aesthetic you saw and how you, as coming at this from a planning perspective, saw that maybe you could change it?
that was a big reason for moving down here, which is funny. I was just talking to someone about this the other day because, growing up on Long Island, I grew up on the water, saw the impacts of, pollution and, putting in water and sewer and, all that stuff. With a lot of environmental movement, most localities were forced to deal with, Clean Water Act. And so up in New York, all the towns put in public sewer. And we actually had bonds for open space preservation. So all this stuff was going on Long Island, and I worked in a pretty big planning office, and there wasn't really opportunity to move up, and all I did was subdivision reviews. So I saw this position as an opportunity to come to an area that hadn't been developed that strongly, and make a difference. And it's kind of funny coming down here and seeing us being Gloucester, going through the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, the TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, trying to be on a pollution diet, our public water and sewer, we're investing in public water and sewer and trying to get those hookups. So kind of going through the same growing pains that we went through in Long Island. And then down here, people have a strong sense of property rights versus up there it was property values. So, after people had been impacted by development, sorry, they should pick up there. After people had been impacted by development, then they wanted to save it. Whereas here, that having that foresight of wanting to protect it before it got destroyed, it exists to some extent because a lot of people have moved here from other areas and they know what could happen. And so a lot of times the come here's are the ones that are on the historical committee or that are trying to preserve what was here. Even up in Matthews, the Matthews Maritime Foundation is mostly started by people. A lot of them are from Long Island. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent. I tend to do that, but so that was my idea as a planner, though, and kind of being stuck in the there's politics, there's people's perception, and being in a democracy, you have you have a right for your say, but not for your way, and so. The way is the way of the majority or of those that chose to attend. So a lot of our laws and everything are based on those people that wrote them. So it's not always working the way I would hope it would. And Gloucester, there's a lot of opportunities, but Gloucester chooses to not take them because it tends to be low taxes and trying to protect people's property rights. And a lot of times things that you do to protect the general good cost money. Like doing an archaeology survey costs money. And if you're trying to get development to keep taxes low, you don't always want to make someone spend that extra money. So,
right. Well, you're coming into a community that already has a vision for itself, which is largely based on property rights. So what is that public involvement like? What do you often hear at public forums or things like that?
I often joke around that Gloucester's kind of bipolar because you hear different things from different people. And in our comprehensive plan, and actually in a lot of the meetings, we were actually working on updating our comprehensive plan, the idea of rural character is like one that is constantly comes up. We were trying to preserve a rural character. And it's just interesting because what I consider rural might be different from what someone else might consider rural. And we even had that whole discussion of what do you consider rural character? And then even, rural character versus a working rural atmosphere. So an actual farm with pesticides and smelly cows or whatever, may not be someone's idea of a bucolic rural character, So we have that, but then we also hear people want economic development. They want to keep taxes low, and in order to keep taxes low, we need more development, we need more jobs, and most of our community commutes across the bridge to the military jobs, to the jobs over in Hampton Roads, and so trying to keep people here and work here, but then you have that critical mass, more jobs, more people, more development. So it's that that really dichotomy of those two different things. And I truly believe you can protect your rural character and still have that because, we have the north end of the county. You can have economic development in a village atmosphere. One of our recent plans at Gloucester Point is trying to convert Gloucester Point through development into a more village because, 17 came through, we had all this growth, and no one really thought about that's the only road. And so they didn't really make the road connections. There really wasn't a lot of planning. So now everyone goes on 17 and you have all that congestion. So most people complain about the quality of life, the congestion on 17, how ugly it is. And, but yet we need more development. So how do you fix that? How do you kind of, our growth management plan that's in the comprehensive plan and is in the future plan is to keep growth between the courthouse and the point, and to try to focus it. That's where we have water and sewer, but to try to keep the two village areas kind of villagey, walkable. We need to create the walkability at the point. In the courthouse, we have some, but we don't really have it like outside Main Street. So those are kind of our plans, and then try to keep the north end of the county rural, available for working farmers. We're also trying to do more for working waterfronts. We had a really strong waterman economy, and that's kind of, with suburbanization, that's kind of gotten out of the way. People come here, they have their boats, they have their jet skis, and the working waterfronts, they're not wealthy, and so they're losing their places to dock. And so we're actually making a strong effort to try to improve that. And one of the things is public access to the water. We were a natural resource-based community, and we were starting to lose that because, when you drive on 17, you don't see how beautiful Gloucester is. But if you see it from the water, it's beautiful. If you see it from some of the roads, the scenic roads in the back, but you don't see it on, you and I just driving wouldn't see it. So
that's true. That also gives me a lot of follow-up questions. But you also mentioned come heres and how they're the people on the preservation committees, but a lot of the natives, people that claim ancestry here, would say that the come heres are the ones that want Starbucks and Wendy's and another Walmart and all these other amenities that natives don't really want. And I was hoping to get your take on that.
I think it's individuals. When you say natives don't want it, that's not been my experience. I think that it's a more of a personal thing. I think most people that have lived here a long time, come here's and been here's, first embrace the change. To not have to drive over the bridge to go get get certain things. And, people talk about the first Hardee's, the first traffic light, when Walmart first came, then we were at Super Walmart. And I think there was a point where, oh, wait a second, this is too much. And now it's like, people got used to the convenience and not having to drive. Actually, I guess people used to drive to Richmond a lot too. Now it's like, well, we have all this stuff. When can we get the? Well, no, we do have a Starbucks. What's the one? U-Crops, or they don't have U-Crops anymore. Whatever fancy grocery store we need now. So I think some of the Ben here's, they still want economic development because they want to keep taxes low, and I think a lot of the come here's want services that they were used to in their previous location, and those services cost money, and those services result in higher taxes. And so in order to keep the taxes low, you need more commercial development. So I think it's not that a simple answer. I don't disagree, and I've argued with own in-laws about this. I think when you move to an area, you should know where you're moving, and you're moving that because you like it that way. So I think a lot of us come here like to keep it this way. We joke around being I want to be the last one and shut the door behind me, but because I get very frustrated when people move here from other areas and they hate the hunting dogs. Well, you move to a community that hunting is a big thing. They don't like the watermen. They don't want the oyster boats making noise in the morning. Well, you moved here to a rural area. So those are the kind of things that upset me about the development. I think development is just kind of it's like evolution. You just get more people want more things, whether it's more opportunities to shop or you need sewer to protect the water because you have too many septic systems. It's just, that's a result of more people, and people are attracted to good areas. So, it's, and then I think individual. Some people like driving an hour to go to the mall, and other people want to live 5 minutes from the mall.
Fair enough. And what's really cool about, how you're protecting rural life is it's also based not just on having a low population density, but about like the activities that make it rural and make it a rural based economy. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the inspiration for trying to protect specifically the waterman's economy.
That actually started with the oysters, the growing oyster industry. The oysters died, and then now they grow them in cages. And I don't pretend to know a lot about this, and I'm not to get myself in trouble. But that's what planners are: jack of all trades, masters of none. So we can talk a little about everything. But so people started getting into growing oysters at their homes and at their docks. And so we had this one situation down at Gloucester Point where somebody was growing oysters, and a neighbor complained, and it kind of brought up this whole use conflict thing of, you have all these uses along the waterfront, and, the board was hearing complaints about the oystermen, but then the oystermen are good, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation was actually, paying people to grow oysters to clean the bay. So the Middle Peninsula Planning District, through their program, asked the board about creating it was called the York River Use Conflict Committee, and I was chosen as a planner to serve on that, and we had a board member, and then there was just all these different people, and kind of all these ideas about the watermen kind of came out, like that their docks, people are buying up the marinas and fixing them up, raising the standards, and the watermen had nowhere to go. The commercial piers, with all the regulations about septic were not allowed to be used, so all the changes, all these regulations were kind of kicking them out. Plus, watermen are very proud. They're not going to come ask, they're not going to come complain, they're not going to come to board meeting. So, as being part of the committee, I realized all the things like our ordinances actually were written for suburbanization, and they actually encouraged the loss of watermen. I mean, like if you wanted to be a waterman, you had to get a special exception. You had to go through this different process, and it really should be a by right use. They were here first, So we've been working ever since, that. So that was building an awareness to me that our ordinances are actually hindering what people said they wanted, and so we've been working on changing. We did an ordinance for aquaculture to allow it by right. To not kind of put a roadblock. We also did the same thing with agriculture. Our ordinances try to separate the agricultural uses, which are the white, from the suburban. So like we didn't allow farming in a residential district, but a lot of the residential districts had existing farms. And then we didn't allow farm stands, we didn't, so we say we want to preserve the rural character, yet someone comes in and wants to put up a farm stand, it's not permitted. So we, again, modified our ordinance just recently to allow that, so at the end, I would say that the ordinance was written in the 80s when we were the highest growing locality. So I think they were just trying to, this is residential, this, separate the uses. And, those stuff about growing local and buying local, we're kind of reversing some of that and supporting that stuff. So.
Plus, when you have, an agricultural economy that, like what's it called now? Agro-tourism?
Yeah.
Is that something that you can see happening in Gloucester more?
I'm trying to actually, that's the thing I've been wanting to do is use that as economic development. Our economic development guy is more like, he's more into the industrial park and working with the Hampton Roads. But, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not used to talking straight through. Excuse me. So we actually, that ordinance was meant to help agritourism. We actually added that to our definitions, where I would love to see a winery or something, because we're a very, we're kind of the big fish in the Middle Peninsula. So we're kind of connected to the rest of Middlesex, and they're very rural, Middlesex, Essex. So I see a real great opportunity for agritourism and ecotourism. Again, one of the ideas for Main Street is trying to connect down to the Warehouse Landing Road, and that we have a Blue Ways guide, which we just recently developed. That's one of the points, and then hopefully those people will come shop, eat on Main Street. So trying to, again, there's ways. We have the tourism from a historical point of view, agritourism, which is really kind of right now not a big thing, but hoping to encourage more of that. Even the working watermen, I was joking around of like if you had an oyster trail, you have the bear, so that's just something that, again, it's all these things is who's going to spearhead them. It's really not the county. Those are the kind of thing where the county might help with an idea, but you need somebody to carry, kind of like the Main Street Preservation Trust is doing a lot of that here on Main Street. So trying to get a champion, we actually finally had a champion for the Blue Waves, so we were able to get that going because somebody wanted to start a charter doing, kayak charter type thing. So they really encouraged working with the county, and we created partnerships with VIMS, and now we have a little Blue Waves guide, with 5 different trails in the county. So those are all just things that we've heard from citizens, a lot of come here too, but that these are things that they live in such a beautiful area, but we're not really supporting them. So, and I think that's just a change, similar to the change that happened in New York, where they're seeing their county, focusing on stuff and not focusing on the natural resources that were here that attracted people to come here in the beginning. So
right. The last place I interviewed people like this was in Nantucket.
Oh, okay.
And do you in the planning department?
No, she actually works for it's a conservation group. They own quite a bit of property up there. Her name's Karen Beatty.
Oh no. Yeah, but I did interview people from the Conservation Foundation. And the guy that engineered tourism up there said that I don't want an ice cream cone tourist. I want a tourist that's going to buy a $5,000 painting and a sports coat. And I'm sort of wondering, because the tourism in Gloucester is really getting off the ground because you're starting to organize it. What kind of people are you kind of trying to attract?
Definitely not those people. I think, I think we really haven't thought about that. Other than we want to try everybody, but there has been discussion that originally we focused a lot on our history, and with Gloucester, unfortunately, we don't or haven't historically taken advantage of our history. And most of the great things that occurred were, again, individuals that, fought, for Fairfield, Roswell, T.C. Walker House. We're trying to organize something with that. And so when they actually created the Department of Tourism, so it used to all be, and I think you already interviewed Carol, so originally it was just Parks and Rec, and they created tourism, and we actually take a certain percentage of our lodging tax that goes towards tourism. So they've been really working on, fixing the structures around the court circle and trying to promote, events and everything with tourism, historic tourism. And they're kind of like, well, who does that? That's kind of the older demographics. Most people that are into history tend to be older, not to stereotype. So how do we get a different demographics? And that's kind of where we came up with some of the ecotourism ideas. And we did a bike ride. We're still trying to get a bike thing going. It's really hard though, because our rural roads are great to ride bikes on, but they're not really safe. So, and now, and that's really expensive to make bike trails, really expensive. So, but we are, when I say we're trying to attract people, that's just like another group that, okay, well, we kind of have, we're already, I'm not saying we have, because we still can promote a lot of our historic tourism much better. But it's just hard to pull people from, all the great stuff in Williamsburg and Yorktown, and we don't have the money to have a water, the riverfront they have, I don't know if you ever saw our little gazebo, that's our riverfront. But, so again, we're trying to be geared towards as many people as possible. The agritourism, like a pumpkin patch or something, try to get the little kids. We do the Daffodil Festival, so that they do the Chalk Fest. So I think we're, trying to gear it to as many people as possible to try to get every type of demographic. We don't have a lot of money to do capital improvements to fix things up. I think Main Street is our jam, but there's really not a lot here. We're trying to, we're working on trying to get up like a bikeway from Beaver Dam Park to Main Street, so that, try to combine the natural environment with the historic. So, but we'll take any tourist that's willing to come and visit Gloucester, spend money. When I first got here, we didn't even have a hotel. We just had the 2 motels. So now we have the Comfort Inn and the Hampton Inn. So at least people have I'm not saying anything that's motels, but at least people have a place to stay. And then we have some really nice bed and breakfasts, and they've been, they're always helpful with the tourist ideas. So we have a great group of a base of volunteers here in Gloucester County.
Okay. One of the things that a very old man who lives on Main Street said about Main Street is that it's the first time in his life that he can't walk to like someplace where he can get bread or gasoline.
I know who said that.
Do you? Yeah, I'm
we
sure.
Brought it up at many meetings. So. That's not true. You can walk to the Dollar General and they sell bread.
Okay.
But things change, and one of the things I'm trying to do is connect Main Street across 17, which really isn't Main Street, but I am upset that I can't walk to Gloucester Pharmacy. And I could walk physically, but I would have to cross 17, which is not comforting. So we are trying to get a pedestrian signal at either end of Main Street so you could cross 17 safely. Pretty expensive, and it's in a plan, and VDOT, even though VDOT says they support, and this is probably something I shouldn't say, VDOT theoretically supports bike and pedestrians, but their people, their idea is to move traffic. So even though they have a policy supporting bicycle and pedestrians, it's kind of hard to get them to spend money on it. And the county doesn't maintain any of our own roads, so we don't put money towards it either. So you have these ideas, like people say, Carol Steele did a study, the Parks and Rec Department did a study, and people want walking trails and stuff, but nobody's willing to pay for it. So that being said, I think Main Street has changed, and that's capitalism. Unfortunately, we don't have any control of that. When I first got here, the post office was in the Morgan building. And so the post office just draws people to Main Street. So you had the post office, and then where the current library is, that was a grocery store, and it closed down. So unfortunately, back in the day when he could, go shopping on Main Street, it was small little markets, and people didn't get in their car. It wasn't such an auto-based economy. There was a ferry to go across the bridge, so you would shop on Main Street. You wouldn't be going across the bridge to Costco or Sam's Club or, so I don't think you can recreate the past. I think you can create a new current, and I think that I know personally, I don't know if you've experienced our parking situation, but once I'm parked in that spot, I don't like to move my car. I will walk anywhere. I walk to all my meetings. I will walk down to the Dollar General, because it's just not worth getting in a car. But I don't think most people are like that. They go for the convenience. And even with the parking on Main Street, people say there's no parking. There's plenty of parking on Main Street, but everyone wants parking right in front of the store that they're going to. Whereas you go to Walmart, you work way, so it's all people's perception. And we just did a plan for Main Street, and parking comes up all the time. And coming from New York, they don't know what parking problem is. And then even people say you want to have a parking problem because that means you have a vibrant downtown, and people are willing to park and walk if there's things to walk to. So, and I think that vision will come true in Gloucester Main Street. It's just going to take time. So,
what are some of the threats that you see to creating a vision of Gloucester Courthouse that everybody could be happy with?
I think some of the NIMBYism, because people say so the community says they want certain things, but people living here may not want that change. And, some of the changes, the increased density, and as we just talked about, increased density means increased traffic. So, you might be a little more inconvenienced on Main Street, to deal with those people. Theoretically, people wouldn't be having to get in the cars as much, but unfortunately, you still need to work, and I don't think we'll have that many jobs on Main Street of people living and working right on Main Street. So I think that's one of the things. Some of it is us rewriting our ordinances to allow the development to occur that way. And mostly it's going to be resources. Like we have a idea for a trail to go all the way around Main Street, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So putting that together, and then dealing with some of the NIMBYism of, I don't want that trail in front of my property. I don't want strangers walking in front of my property. Kind of even the naysaying about, having those pedestrian crossways across 17, who would cross 17, who would walk on 17. So those are just some of the negativity, But, for as many people that are negative, there's the people that want it. But I think you have to be most responsive to the people that live here, because they do. So if they really don't want it, it's probably not going to happen. Like even the original Main Street enhancement project, they talked about putting a bike trail on Main Street, and the group decided not to. Mm-hmm. Now I always see people biking on Main Street, just because you really have at one point you have to, if you want to go anywhere in the county, you either go on 17 or you have to go through this portion of Main Street. So, decisions are made in a certain place and time, and that decision might impact future, it might close a door, might open a door, but when you think over history, every decision, affects the future in some way or the other, and either helps it to achieve the goal or might put a hindrance to achieve that goal. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any specific moments in mind where NIMBYism, or sort of that bipolarism that you're talking about, ended up kind of scrapping a plan?
Oh, actually, there's lots of times that I think that. Well, one good example throughout the county is all the dead-end roads, because people like cul-de-sacs and everything. And so, like, one of our ideas was to have this trail to Beaver Dam Park from the courthouse. And all the subdivisions, so any place that's not wetlands is now a subdivision. And none of those roads connect. They all have to go out on Main Street or out onto Roaring Springs Road. And if they only had connected them, we could have this really cool bike thing, or something. So that's just of, nobody really thinking about that kind of activity in the future. Even our water and sewer plan of just kind of, we have water on one side, sewer on the other, and it just makes it really expensive to develop. And so that kind of creates an issue. I'm trying to think of NIMBYism. I think, probably a recent one is like some multifamily projects. People don't like multifamily, and Gloucester historically, the multifamily we have was built in the 80s when, they put the bridge in, and people just expanded over here to Gloucester, and it's not the highest quality multifamily. So some other projects that might have been a good project that, transitional between some commercial areas and residential areas, the neighbors came out and said, oh, we don't want these, And then I guess another good example is the schools, like a New Page Middle School, not wanting to put that money, the community couldn't agree on should the school go back where it was or in the new location. And then the kind of fight between the school board and the board, and then how much money was spent on the project. And you just think that everyone worked together, and there was a lot of fighting and a lot of distrust, and I'm sure we're going to get a good product, but could it have been better had things been done differently, or had they planned for it ahead of time? They actually bought that property a long time ago, but they didn't really get the community involved in a plan. So when Page got destroyed by the tornado, instead of everyone embracing, oh, well, this is where it should go, there was a fight, and it really wasn't so much NIMBYism, but a real strong sense of where that school should go, and still causes problems today.
You mentioned subdivisions, and we sort of think about them as kind of being like the natural white middle class place to be, but it's really important to remember that it's more of a recent construction. So in what ways does having subdivisions like this board right here, how does that change the game?
Well, I think at Gloucester, the subdivisions, came into being, as we were growing. So yeah, the subdivisions, it's classic throughout the country, but after World War II and the GI Bill and all the people coming home and raising families, they were looking for places to go. So if you think about Hampton Roads being a major military area, well, a lot of people moved here because I remember when I was in, Norfolk for, whatever. So then developers started creating subdivisions, for those families, and And even in an agricultural area like Gloucester, they were embraced. So we have the Waterview subdivision down at the point, which is, actually very nicely laid out. And then you can kind of see as time, people, more developers started developing, then you got the cheaper homes and Smurf villages. There's one place that was called Smurf villages, the little houses. And at the time, the counties were small. So you had very small government, which is what people want us to go back to. But we had tons of subdivisions built, private roads, no road maintenance agreement. So, we still, now we require them to all be public roads. And so you kind of, everything grows over time and you react. And most of the reaction, we always zone to the lowest common denominator. Somebody does something bad, somebody doesn't do things the right way, let's make a law. So that's kind of Gloucester. A lot of the laws we have today are based on people not developing correctly, not doing the road maintenance agreement. Okay, we can't trust that they're going to maintain their own roads, so we have to have state roads. Even standards, state building code, standards for development, because some of the homes were real shoddy. Now you have to connect to public water and sewer because all these multifamily homes on septic. So again, I think it's just part of evolution in terms of changing the game. I think it did. Our rural economy got more suburban, then we need more services, so then we had to build more schools, and then we had to build the sewer system, and then we had to do the reservoir because we had to provide water for all these people. So it's just kind of this evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have examples of kind of that reactionary lawmaking where someone does something like shoddy? I mean, who are they doing the shoddy stuff to? Why is there not like a public like?
Well, I think that's exactly what happened. So a perfect example is our current zoning and subdivision ordinance, which was adopted right before I started working here, and I was able to kind of actually literally read all the minutes from the public hearings. It was very contentious, and Basic Gloucester didn't have zoning until 1984. I just graduated from college. You probably weren't even born. So it's fairly recent. Whereas the community I came from in New York, they had it since the 30s. But zoning and everything really didn't occur until I don't know if you know much about it, but the Enabling Act in 1928, and zoning was based on the tenements, and the people are living in horrible conditions. So it was, it's all supposed to be for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and it's part of the police power. So you're taking away people's rights for their own good, So in 1998, the county did countywide rezoning. They just originally basically you were only a subdivision if you were in a certain area. Anything outside that was not a subdivision. So if you did a 5-acre lot, it wasn't a subdivision, never got reviewed. And so people were building all these 5-acre lots, weren't providing access to them, dirt roads, and subdivisions were being created without the road maintenance agreement. It was mobile homes all over the place. So the county had all these people, but the real estate, because in Virginia, county governments totally depend on real property taxes for their costs. So we were growing very, very fast, fastest growing county in the 80s. And we had all these kids in school populations going up, and how do we pay for it? We didn't have enough taxes. So the county at that time made a conscious decision, and the state enabled this. You could limit the number of mobile homes because mobile homes are considered personal property, not real property. So if you have a mobile home on a property, you're only really paying for the land. So it actually is like a car. It doesn't increase in value, it decreases in value. So the state actually passed legislation that localities could restrict mobile homes to only in agricultural districts or mobile home parks. So the county adopted that ordinance, and it's kind of why we have a funny zoning map, because we had to, if it was used agricultural, we had to zone it agricultural, even if that's not the future plan. Then we really increased our subdivision standards. We limited the number of, the original ordinance said no private roads, but then there was a lot of, feedback on that, and what if I just want to do 3 lots? So we actually allow some non-public roads. But so we really upped our standards, and then we also did the highway corridor overlay. So 17, which everyone says is so ugly, we put standards in for landscaping and all this stuff. But what it did was it increased the cost of development, which is what the Board of Supervisors at that time wanted. And our comp plan talked about they wanted higher quality development. So that impacts the little guy that, I used to be able to do the subdivision. Now I have to be a developer. I have to have money up front. I have to, so that was a big change for Gloucester County. And of course, that's right when I got here and people were not happy. And for a while, we didn't see any growth. And then we had the high, then we started growing again. That's actually when all these subdivisions came. And then we had the economy just tank. So, and now, interesting with the economy, the board is asking us to look at our ordinances and change them to be more encouraging for development, to not be such high standards, to not be so costly.
How do you feel about that?
I have mixed feelings. I would agree that some of our requirements, like our highway corridor landscaping, are like so many trees and you can't even fit the sewer stuff. So I think there's some common sense approach things. What requires a site plan, we need to look at that. But I have actually said to many supervisors, well, okay, you want to be business friendly. Do you mean any business? Do you, and I don't mean any business, but any type of development, or do you want still certain standards, and the business people, they're hurting right now. Things are really bad in the economy, but the residents that live here that maybe commute over to the bridge and still have their jobs, they still want to come home to, a rural area. They want to, not have to deal with a lot more traffic. So it's, again, that whole weighing everything against each other.
Yeah.
So, but my job is to do what the community wants me to do. I don't mean to sound corny, but that, I know what I want, but my job is to do what the majority of people in Gloucester County want.
Yeah.
Not always easy.
No.
So.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, kind of switching subjects, where does preservation fit into all this?
Well, preservation is totally voluntary. Matter of fact, I've spent 4 years working on an ordinance to try to require preservation of structures. We have a very limited historic ordinance. And basically in 1984, when we adopted zoning, any property that was on the National Register was included as an historic district. So that was the Gloucester Courthouse Square Historic District. And then it's just individual properties throughout the county. Actually on the map, they're striped red. So there's not a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And they are spread out, and typically a historic district is, a district, and it's usually would benefit the public because you could see it from the road. And then our historical committee, our ordinance is terrible. I mean, it's just 2 pages, doesn't give them a lot of direction. The historical committee is a group of volunteers, not specifically trained, in preservation. So a lot of the preservation that goes on in the county is voluntary. It's people buy homes and they care about them and they take care of them. So, so we have 16 properties that one was just taken off in our regular, regulated historic district. We have a lot more properties that are on the National and State Register that are, they just, anything they do, they could get tax credits or whatever, but it's totally voluntary. The county, through various efforts, have tried 4 times in the 13 years that I've been here to revise the historic ordinance. And it's pretty much failed every time. It's the board does not want to put restrictions, put additional burden on property owners to preserve their structures. They don't want an architectural review board. We just recently got into the state just enabled localities to require some type of documentation for cultural resources, which would also include archaeology. And so we work with Dane and David and 2 people from the historical committee and a bunch of people from Main Street on an ordinance to potentially require cultural resource surveys on certain type of development. And even that group of people could not agree on what would be needed. So we did a lot of work. Actually, I have a whole little PowerPoint on it. We did a lot of work. We actually... there's this old Farmer Nicholson map to archaeologists, citizen, just people that are interested. And they had this old map, and they had sticky notes, little push pins and sticky notes. And so Bill Lawrence, I don't know if he digitized all that, the volunteer. And then we work with GIS, and so we now have that on the map, so we could pull it up. So that's the local data, and we compared that with the state's data. So we've gotten a lot of information, but we still have no requirements. And pretty much the committee said that the county's not ready for an ordinance at this time. But at least now staff can identify resources. And if somebody is coming with a development, we can say, well, do you know that, you have this historic situation here, and there might be archaeology on your site, and maybe you want to consider. So, but it's still all voluntary. So.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was in Nantucket, it was the same thing, and they were actually trying to put jurisdiction of the historical committee in over the inside of the house.
Oh wow!
And
I know they have strict rules on the outside.
Yeah. And so the NIMBYism struck back in that moment, but in a place that's really concerned with property rights, and also it's the property owners that are invested enough to actually do something about restoring or rehabilitating their property. How do you feel like your role could change in the next 20, 30 years?
I think our role, I think what we try to do now, especially, I mean, I've learned a lot in just working with these different groups. I mean, I learned a ton from Dane and David. And we, as a department, do, whenever there's a rezoning, we require some type of cultural resources assessment survey, I guess they're called. And I've encouraged them more. We actually encourage conservation easements. We're very familiar with the tax credit stuff now. So we, again, just try to educate people and provide opportunities and connections. We give out people's names. We have contact information for DHR. I think the county might eventually embrace some type of historic ordinance. I think it would require something horrible to happen, like somebody tearing down a treasured building and putting up a sheets. And our ordinance, and me saying there's nothing I can do about it. We had an incident, the Sewell's Ordinary. I don't know if you're familiar with the building, but it's historic. But it's not on the National Register because when they put 17, they moved it from this side to this side, so it's been moved. But it's an old ordinary where people come, and it was a restaurant for the longest time, and people loved it, and it was like one of the few restaurants. And then we had Applebee's and Ruby Tuesdays, and the woman tried to sell it, couldn't sell it. And she's in her 60s, and she needed money, so she sold it to a used car lot. And the family bought it. People flipped out. Can't you do anything about it? Well, it's a permitted use. It's not historic, regulated historic site. It's not even on the National Register. Not that would prevent the use. So we're like, I thought that was an opportunity. Well, that's the issue. Our ordinance has no teeth, and this isn't even on. Even if it was in the historic district, there's nothing we could do about it. So the Historical Society, which is not associated with the county, they're an independent group. Members of them and members of the APVA met with the owners, the Niblets, who were very nice people. And they said, we want to preserve the structure, so they've done the best they could as a used car lot, and they've added structures, and they had to meet highway corridor, but it is a used car lot. But they used the existing house as an office. It's the existing ordinary, and they've kept it its integrity, but the use is a kind of awkward use, but so that's just an example of what could happen without regulations, but nothing, nothing, yeah. And then the other one, the Abington Glebe, we have Ken Hout Chevrolet in front of it, and then a mini storage in front of it. So you have this historic, church glebe thing. I even learned what a glebe is now, which I didn't know. And in front of it are two very commercial structures. Ken Hout Chevrolet is beautiful, but it is big and bright lights and doesn't quite, go with the rural bucolic glebe that's behind it. But there's not a lot of backlash from the community, so
yeah,
I don't see. Again, it would have to be now. Like the Warner Hall, incredible stewards of their property. So a lot of the big property are great stewards, but nobody sees them. So again, it would have to be something on 17. Even Edge Hill, Texaco, that's being preserved, which is great. Now, had that been torn down and a sheets put up, maybe someone might get upset. So I don't know.
You said that one property was taken off. Which one is that?
Timberneck Farmhouse. They came in for rezoning for planned unit development. Really cool, very high-end development. They haven't sold a lot yet, but so originally they had proposed to move the farmhouse, which is a classic historic farmhouse, and it's on the National Register, but George Washington didn't sleep there. It's not a plantation. It's a very functional house. It's a really cool, beautiful house falling down, but I wouldn't mind fixing it and living there if I had tons of money, which is the big thing. So the developer had offered to move it and donate it to the Historical Society, and but then some preservationists said if you move it, it loses its value. So that went to the Planning Commission. So they said, okay, we won't move it then. We'll offer it for sale. It's in the premier spot overlooking the York River. It's the best lot in the subdivision. And if they can't sell it within so many years, then they were going to offer to let somebody move it. But if the road was already built, they'd have to move by barge. And then after that, they can raise it. So the time period's been passed, and so they could tear it down, which I think it's kind of benign neglect now. It's in pretty bad shape the last time I saw it. But they did make a concerted effort to sell it, and they couldn't sell it. It's still there. No houses, no lots have been sold in the economy. So, but part of that rezoning was that it would be no longer rezoned under the historic district. They'd have to meet these conditions, and then it was taken off. It's still on the National Register, but the National Register doesn't prevent you from tearing it down.
Right.
And they did proffer that if it is torn down, they would donate any of the materials to the Gloucester Museum and document it, so at least the information would still be there.
Yeah. Do you think that these places that are still around, for example, like the ruins of Roswell, Fairfield's another good example, are an opportunity to bring in tourists?
I do, although I think we need more than just them, and so we hopefully are getting the Middle Peninsula State Park, which is same location as Fairfield. So if that gets there, plus where Wacomico is a big one, but that I believe is going to be interpreted from Jamestown. People will be ferried over. And then it's kind of an issue because, that's all the way up on Puritan Bay up in the north end of the county. And you can see there's not a lot of roads going up there. So it's like another issue of the roads going to the state park and to those places are pretty narrow. They're what they call Bird Act roads. They were county roads back in the day, and then they were dedicated to the state. So they're literally a 30-foot easement. And there's no room to grow and get bigger. And so, to try to create like a colonial parkway. I mean, again, it's, we don't have the Conservation Corps to help us build stuff anymore, so it's just a different world. And to create the infrastructure to be able to, encourage tourism, and, it's going to be small scale until I really don't know if the county would ever get that. There is an idea to do an upriver crossing, and as a public-private partnership, and again, I don't know how that would go, but in talking to the guy that's interested in doing that, I'm like, well, I could see something like the Colonial Parkway. So you'd go from the courthouse and kind of be able to access these historic sites like Wacomico, like the Middle Peninsula State Park, and then Roswell and Fairfield, because I know Fairfield has ideas to kind of create this cool archaeological park type site. Mm-hmm. and then the courthouse area. And then we also have a really strong African American history in Gloucester that I would like to see capitalized on. And the Moten Center, Holly Knoll, is the Gloucester Institute has they've bought it and are developing it as kind of a campus for the Gloucester Institute, which is in Richmond. And they bring groups out, small groups, and it's still operating like it did when Moten used it as a think tank, during the civil rights movement. So that's kind of cool, and there might be opportunities there. But I don't know how many people that draws. And again, I actually don't want Gloucester to become like Williamsburg. That's a little too touristy. I mean, like the city, the place is different. But so I think unless things change drastically, I don't see we're gonna, our tourism is gonna be low key. I think still part of our economy, but not. State park will help, but that's years away.
Do you have anything you want to share with the entire population of University of Florida?
About
anything?
Gloucester?
Yeah.
Well, Gloucester is a really good community. I working in my field, I get to interact a lot with people, and people can be mean. And a lot of people don't like regulations, but when you get to know people and they get to know you and they kind of understand what you're doing, they want to work with you and they want to help, or they're very vocal about how they want to change things. But the community itself just has incredible volunteers, and so many of the things that I'm talking about are mostly volunteer driven, and the county helps, but without volunteers, that are passionate about things, and I guess I would just encourage people to keep that passion and not give up, and not say, oh, the county won't let me do it, or that's never going to happen, because our board is very responsive to people that come and talk to them, and so if people come, matter of fact, the ordinance that we're just working on was, David Brown came and asked the board if they would consider this, and they did. So, we spent a lot of time and nothing came of it. Well, I shouldn't say nothing came of it. An ordinance didn't come of it, but a lot of partnerships, communication, opportunities to teach each other kind of came of it. So I think, to me, that's the most important, is just kind of those connections you make with people in the community, and those opportunities that come from those connections, like, the Ed Chill Texaco, that was a lot of people in different meetings and people talking to each other, and then possibilities opened up, and all of a sudden, the Thane and David are buying the gas station, So, I mean, that's really cool. And we're trying to do something with T.C. Walker, and it's just, T.C. Walker House, which is right on Main Street. And again, it's just not time. So, you put it on the shelf and you wait. The cool stuff that happened around the court circle, they uncovered a bunch of, there's a whole town under there that, so that's just the cool thing that happened. And again, in the 13 years I've been here, just seeing, you sometimes think, oh, we're not making any progress. We have all these plans and nothing's happening. But there's little incremental changes that just occur, and just little baby steps, and you start, educating more people. And it always amazes me how many people don't know about things. They don't know who T.C. Walker is. They don't know that, some people still don't know that Warwick Comico is right here in Gloucester County, or what it is, or who it was. And so I think it's just, every time, time you have a chance to educate someone and talk about it and its significance, and then, they might go research it, and then they might go talk to someone else, and, so it's, I think, that's what community planning is all about. So, I think, Gloucester's a great place. It's like any other place. It's made of people, and people are strange and who they are. And I think Gloucester still has, I always say that we're in its kind of awkward teenage years. We still don't know who we want to be. And I think we're getting there. So, I think still, though, there's people holding on to the past, don't want any change, people that want to see us grow and become, I'm not sure what. But then there's, I think the two village areas, I think we have a good idea of what we want there. It's the in-between part we're still trying to figure out. But we definitely want low taxes, rural character, more jobs.
Yeah.
Clean bay, utopia.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.